thank you so much for coming onto the podcast.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I would love I looked at your organization and everything you offer, and coming from a healing perspective, I absolutely love and adore that. So, if you could introduce yourself, what Men of Integrity stands for, what you offer, and I'm curious how you got into this role and where you're at now.
Sure. So I'm Michael Tierno, and I'm an expanded states guide. I am a co-founder of Men of Integrity, which is a men's group, but we're going to be starting with women-led retreats. Basically, it's a community that starts with a rite of passage. We work with expanded states. It's a 4-day retreat, and we really have been quite successful in getting real powerful, lasting transformation in everybody who's been to our retreats. What sets us apart beyond the specifics of the retreat itself, which is quite well programmed and very intentional and thoughtfully programmed, is that we have a community afterwards that is intended to be lifelong. We do like monthly and soon to be twice a month supporting integration calls. We have a very active Telegram group where people are chiming on all the time. We have a book club, and we do challenges throughout the year, like fasting and connection challenges and things like that. We're really focused on maintaining that connection in that community so that the changes that happen on the retreat will stick. About 30%, 40% of the men who have been to one retreat have gone to a second retreat. Yeah, it's been really, really good. We've been doing it for about 3 years now, 3.5 years. Yeah.
Awesome. And you're based out of Peru, correct?
No, I have another project. I have a ayahuasca retreat center in Peru called Heart Sanctuary Retreats.
Okay.
And that's an additional thing that I'm involved in. I'm not sometimes I will go and I'll be a facilitator, but I don't serve medicine. I don't serve ayahuasca. It's above my pay grade.
Okay, very, very neat. And I saw on your website, roughly 90% of participants eliminate one, I don't want to say bad,
Yeah,
but one negative thing in their life.
sure. So it's tricky to talk about that because that is the truth, right? But I don't, I'm wary to say like that we're not like a recovery retreat place or anything like that. That's not the intention. The intention is in the way these expanded states work. And what we do is whatever ails you, you're going to get some, some clarity, and some positive momentum in the direction where you want to go. Happens that most people have some habits that don't really serve them.
Sure.
And so I would say we're probably batting around 90%. It might be higher, honestly. I can't think of anybody who hasn't dropped at least one habit, and about 75% have dropped two. But it's more than that. Like the habits are kind of like ancillary to why we're using whatever substance or whatever sort of behavior. So when you find the thread to your self-love, self-forgiveness, and like, oh, things are all right, and you have a little more peace in your life, then drinking becomes less of a need for a soothing tool for like drinking alcohol, pornography, whatever.
Right.
So that's it. And the changes aren't just with dropping substances. We have a big part of our program is about relationships. And you probably saw that on my intake form. We do, like, guys that come to our retreat leave with a really better understanding of how to be a man in a relationship. And I don't mean that in kind of this silly, ridiculous, like red pill movement, but just like what it is that if your audience doesn't know, it's kind of a toxic sort of like misogynistic movement that's kind of popular on the internet right now. We really are about the relational aspect of how, you know, the masculine partner and the feminine partner kind of bring all these capacities and how together we're better than individually, and like how we can support each other and bring forth the best in our partner, whether we be on the masculine side or the feminine side. So it's a different model, and I think it's quite effective, and people find it very fulfilling in their relationships.
Right. Not many, at least from my experience, both in practice and of course in the men in my life, not many men have an opportunity to explore that and are educated or trained on how to tap into that level of consciousness. So I love that. And I love that you focus on both the masculine and the divine feminine side and optimize everything.
Yeah, I mean, if you read our testimonials, you'll see a lot of the guys mention like, oh my God, I didn't know that this kind of interrelationship between my partner and why we seem to be misunderstanding each other all the time. It's because we have different needs in relationships. In my model, we evolve differently for different specificities. Men are really good at some things. Your average man is a little bit better than your average woman at a certain domain of tasks and worse at some things. Like guys take silly risks any woman would not take. You know what I mean? On average,
Right.
our needs in relationship are slightly different. So when we explain that and explore that in our workshop with regards to polarized relationships, guys are like, why didn't someone tell me this? Because I've been banging my head against the wall, trying to figure this out and being confused my whole life.
Yeah. And that's not addressed in modern counseling society for the most part, at least from my experience, clinically and personally. So I do love that. How
With like modern marriage and family counseling in relationships. Research tells us that, X and Y or X and Y and Z or these behaviors or these situations we find in are normal. For example, the honeymoon period. All the research says that most people drop out of the honeymoon period by 2 years. And that's quote normal. And so one of my messages is like so many things in society that because it's just, observational data from large pools of things, we call these things normal. And I would like to retrain that, say it's common. It's not normal. It's not healthy, right? Just because, obesity is climbing through the roof and,
Sure.
we're trying to normalize it, but it's just common. So by calling things normal that aren't healthy, I think is not serving anybody. And a lot of marriage and family counseling tells people how to tolerate an intolerable situation, like gives them the tools for like, yeah, you're not like super happy, but let's see how you can kind of like push through a couple more years and tolerate each other versus working on like, what do you need and what do you need? And how can we meet each other's needs so that we can be actually happy in our relationship versus just kind of tolerating each other and doing a whole resentment, contempt cycle that happens.
That's so true. And that whole like fake it till you make it thing, right? Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that way.
Doesn't have to be that way. Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. And I love to looking at your website, how you encourage men to kind of embrace again vulnerability, which isn't normal in our society or isn't educated or I don't know, promoted, I feel especially in the masculinity that's being promoted now.
Right, right. So I have like the way I think about like masculinity and femininity, like we have this thing called the toxic masculine. People think, and it's like, oh, if it's too much masculine and it's toxic masculine. And the way I think about it is like four quadrants. I'm not going to, it's hard to describe it without a slide, but if you think about the characteristics that make up the divine feminine, right? Intuitive, healing, vulnerable, all those kind of things. If you retract away from that, guess what? You have all the characteristics that we sort of consider toxic masculine. So my perspective is to not say that the toxic masculine is just a label, right? We call it toxic masculine. It is what it is. That's what we're going to call it. But my hypothesis is that the toxic masculine actually has nothing to do with masculinity. It's a retraction away from that part of us, which is divinely feminine. So it's a retraction away from our intuition. It's a retraction away from our healing nature, our kindness, our compassion, our vulnerability. So if you retract away from all that, if we tell little boys, don't be a wimp, don't be a whatever, all these different things we could tell them when they are being vulnerable or like softer or more gentle, we tell them that and they say, oh, I can't be that. I must be the opposite of that.
Sure.
And then that manifests as looking like the characteristics that are toxic masculine, but they have nothing to do with the toxic masculine because there's a whole characteristic, their whole litany of characteristics that are related to the divine masculine, your logical nature, your unflappability in the face of danger, your honorability, your articulated sense of self. And there's an actual label that is not known very well, but it's known and the Jungians know it. And that's the wounded feminine archetype, which is actually a retraction away from the divine masculine. You get into this unarticulated sense of self, hysteria, all those things that, that women would be labeled at the beginning of the last century.
Uh,
And they just can't like deal
sure.
with life because they've been told anytime that they are, manifesting their own volition, they're told that's not very ladylike. So they're retracting away from their masculine. They end up in this sort of perspective of like, I can't do for myself. So it's much more sensible, I think. And what we want to do is identify and be connected with both the divine masculine and the divine feminine in each of us, whether we be men or women. It's okay if one is a little bit more strong than the other, because in a divine relationship, you're going to have, like, let's say we're in 70-30 and my partner is 70% masculine sort of archetype connection and 30% feminine archetype. Means I am capable of being vulnerable and emotional and all that. And my partner is a little bit more on that feminine. It's, 70% more identifies with that feminine archetype. And she's also very capable in the masculine way as well. But together we make a whole that's more powerful, because we're bringing these different capacities and this full wholeness to a relationship and to our lives together. And so that's the way I think about it.
Now, for the listeners, how do you weave in the plant medicine components?
So it's a 4-day retreat, and there are different medicines on days 1, 2, and 4. Day 3 is mostly workshops and integration. And day 4, there's some workshop also. So we use the plant medicine part to really get into that part of the self that isn't listened to very often. Right. So the first day we do something, we're going to mention specific things, but we do something that helps people get access and know that they're safe in the plant medicine situation. So it's a short acting experience. And that can be very powerful in and of itself, but its intention, we call that day training. Right. So we're training you to have an experience so you know that you're going to be fine when you come out of it and all that. The second day is a deep dive situation. It's a much longer experience. It's much more intense. And that's where I think the real magic happens. Usually we come out of that, and then, the rest of that evening and the next day is all about processing, integrating, and working through that, whatever material came up, both in group and one-on-ones and set in one of containers. The last day is a heart opening ceremony where we kind of like tie a bow around the whole experience. And then we follow that up with 3 one-on-one integration sessions with one of the facilitators, and then plop you into the community at large with continuing support integration. And so it's really quite a nice experience for folks to go through. And another thing that I would say is, like, we don't tell anybody they have to be anyway. Just know what you're coming to experience, but you don't have to be any way differently. But usually within the first 6 or 8 hours, there's a realization, just because of how the facilitators are, that it is a safe place to be yourself and to be expressive and to talk about things that maybe you've been holding yourself that you can't tell the guys at the bar, for example. And I don't think that necessarily you couldn't tell the guys at the bar. We just we haven't allowed that. Right. So just by watching the facilitators and how we interact with them with like zero judgment and just a lot of curiosity about what they're going through, immediately you get guys that have, to show up with their arms crossed, right? Like, what is this about?
Right.
How's this going to be? Immediately when we start off with our first gratitude and intention ceremony, and there's, oftentimes some tears, and like nobody's, there's no real like ball busting or anything like that. And it's like really open hearted. They're like, oh, this is different. And they drop right into this new way of being. And then they know how to be that way. Now, I don't know. I don't have information on how that translates to all of their relationships. I know that it translates really deeply with their feminine partners in terms of like coming back and like, oh my God, there's a way I can now access all this additional things. I understand like why you've been frustrated with me, all this kind of stuff. But they also have the opportunity, because they're continuing part of our program, part of our group, twice a month, we'll have a community session where if someone's going through something that they need support on, they can do that. And people make friends with members in the community, both through the integration and support calls, and also by knowing each other if they're living in the same area. Sometimes we do these connection challenges with people that were not in their retreat, for example. Supposed to have a connecting call with 4 people. So they make friends and then start calling each other and like really building community.
Which further, of course, nourishes the integration component.
Absolutely.
So what does if there is a typical client look like? How do most men find you, come to you? Are we talking about veterans? Are we talking about men in unhappy marriages? What does that look like?
Yeah. I wish we knew what the super target was, and then we could approach those folks. But we have guys that are as young as 24 and as old as 65,
Wow.
married, unmarried, divorced, second marriage, first marriage, single, the whole rigmarole. So it's the only thing that that might differentiate a person coming to our retreat versus going to another retreat or doing anything is a real understanding that there is a real recognition that there's likely more to life than what they're experiencing, that there's a better way sort of be in the world and embrace this gift of life that we have, and that they're willing to really to explore themselves. Because if we were doing this with women, it would be like so easy to just do 10 of these a year, because women are much more, which is much more willing to go into these hard spaces. They're just, you look at everywhere, everywhere that there's any kind of like some, transformational spaces, all the coaches that are out there, all that kind of stuff, they're mostly women, therapists and all that kind of stuff. They have a better connection with the fact that life can be better through some self-exploration. But with men, it's a little bit harder, to crack, because they come in lots of times with arms folded, even the ones that have already made the choice to come to our retreat. It's more difficult. And that pans out also with my one-on-one work. I'd say about 80% of my clients are women. So men are a tough nut to crack, but we're
Yes,
working on it.
they certainly are. Now, how many men are in a group during a time?
We cap it at 6 men, and there's 4 facilitators. So there's 2 guides, 2 facilitators, and 6 things. So it's a lot of attention is put on each person, because it's a very, very small group. 6 is really the sweet spot where it's big enough that there's variety of people to get to know each other and makes it interesting and a lot of good conversation. With more people, it gets a little more chaotic, manageable, but the closeness becomes a little more, a little less, it's just more diffused. So we settled on a number of 6, and that seems to be working. It's a really sweet number. And then 4, just to make sure that everybody has all the support that they need.
Cool. Very cool. And then for my listeners that might be interested, any medical contraindications or things that might prohibit them from coming?
Absolutely. There's a rigorous intake process. It's not just, you can't just book it and show up.
Right.
It's rare to have somebody that has a medical contraindication, but there's an extensive list. So I couldn't say anything. And some of these contraindications, mostly medication. Of course, anything that has like severe uncontrolled hypertension or kind of heart stuff, just because, doesn't have to do with medicine. But if you're just like on the verge of a heart attack or a stroke, doesn't matter what you do. So anything could be kind of dangerous in that situation. And with regards to medication, there's a long list of medications that couldn't do, but anything can be titrated. We have relationships with a couple of pharmacists that specialize in titration and elimination protocols that we put people in contact if they're on something that's contraindicated, or they can talk to their doctor to figure that out.
Wonderful. I think that's really all my questions looking at your website. Anything that you would like to tell the listeners about what you offer, or things to think about, any seeds to plant?
So
Yeah,
apologies.
that's okay. Yeah. Anything, especially for my men listening, anything that you would like to leave them, plant any seeds of thought, like, maybe this might be for me, or any other offerings?
Oh, sure. I guess just know that whatever you're going through in your life, everybody, first of all, know that everybody's going through something. There's always some challenge. When you're looking at the grocery store, everybody's dealing with something, and they're no different from you. And there is a path forward. There is a path towards experiencing more. I don't like to use the word joy or happiness, because those, I think, are transitory emotions, just like sadness and fear. But there's peace.
Yes.
There's peace that can be found even during your most challenging situations. If you can get rid of a lot of the mental chatter and all that kind of stuff. And then I think is like kind of what happens with plant medicine lots of times, especially when you have somebody that can kind of like help you integrate how to watch those thoughts and stuff like that. There is peace that you can find on a daily basis. It's only up to you to take the action of just doing it, because it's like whatever you're suffering, you got to ask yourself the question, how long do you want to suffer? Do you want to stop this year, or do you want to wait 5 years and be at the same place? That's the situation I see so many people in. It's like procrastinating their own healing journey. I'll wait till everything, the stars are aligned. Meanwhile, I'm not having the greatest time of it over this, 1, 2, 3, 4 years that I'm waiting for the perfect moment. I would say, whatever you decide to do, seize the day, do it as soon as you can, what we want to do. Everything's an opportunity cost. So whenever you say like, oh, I don't want to do it this way because I'm going to have to use my vacation days, that's fine. But realize that you are making that choice. On the other side of that choice, they'd say that the other side of that choice is always regret or reward, right? There's always something that starts with an R. It's regret or reward. So you choose whatever opportunity costs, and everything you do has an opportunity cost. So know what you're deciding to do and what your opportunity cost is. And I would say just jump on it. Try at least have a conversation and see if there's a good fit. That's what I would say.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking about everything with you. Of course,
Absolutely.
share the website with the listeners and ways that they can find you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.